Good afternoon, YouTube. This is Jonathan, and today I wanted to take a look at Axis and Allies 1942 Second Edition, specifically Japan's first turn. Let's consider some strategies Japan might employ, some things that it might do. Now, because Japan goes fourth in countries, there are some significant things that could happen on the board before it gets to take its turn. So we'll be just outlining some things to keep in mind, and you'll want to be, when you play as Japan, just keep flexibility in the back of your mind. Well, if England does this, this is how I'll respond down in the south. If Russia does that, here's how I'll respond up in the north. Those are really the two big areas. This area down here, India and Burma, could look very different depending on what England does. If it decides to build tanks and press forward, if it builds infantry, if it moves anything forward over to India, or if it just sits building up, moves from India to Burma, or if it just sits building up in India for a turn. If they decide to do annoying things with their fleet down here, doing annoying things with their transport over here, or if they decide to do something different. The one move that you should count on, even if nothing else, is that they will attempt to take out this transport. Whether it's just their fighter, or they just send, I believe it's a cruiser down there, or if they send the entire fleet, Japan should count on this being gone on their first turn before they begin. Then the other front is the Soviet front up here, and this could look different, again, depending on what Russia wants to do. It might concentrate down here, leaving minimal forces or no forces up here, which would force Japan to devote a transport up here to take a territory only worth one production. It could decide that it really doesn't want its men up along the coast to get hurt by coastal bombardments, and it might decide to pull them back here, which is dramatically going to change what Japan needs to do. Personally, I think that the better option is for Russia to concentrate here and have minimal forces here, either 1 or 0. No more than 2 infantry up there, simply because it puts pressure on Japan in Manchuria. It prevents them from sending maybe as much as they'd want to over here to attack China. They have to leave at least something behind, or they need to use their transport to fortify here on their turn if Russia is bearing down. Even if Russia has no intention of attacking, if Manchuria is not defended well enough, they might change their mind and decide to assault. So I prefer Soviet Union to put pressure on Japan, though if I'm Japan, of course, I prefer that they pull back. Now, there are a couple things to keep in mind. Regardless of what things look like down here or up there, you're going to want to do your best, within reason, to clear out the British Navy. The last thing we want is random British transports dropping off just a couple units, all they've got, but taking some of our islands. It may not seem like a big deal at first, but turn after turn, round after round, if we don't deal with that situation, it's only going to get worse. Even if they only take, let's say, an island worth 4, and they don't take anything else, but we never take that island back, that's going to be an issue for us late in game when every production counts. Now, I like to be aggressive with Japan. I like to get into the Asian war as quickly as possible. Generally, I've found that if Moscow falls, as long as neither of the Central Powers' capitals are about to fall at the same time, Axis usually win. And so I try to get both Germany and Japan to race towards Moscow as quickly as possible. In order to do that, at the very least, Japan should take this. These troops have nowhere else to go but there, so you might as well move them forward. That doesn't affect your border. You don't have to defend additional territories. Now you're defending one here, you move it forward, you're still just defending one additional territory in China. Now, depending on what happens in India, you might have the opportunity to go after the U.S. forces here. Possibly Burma, probably not so much Burma, even if India hasn't moved forward. because that might spur the Indian buildup into action, whereas they might be content to just build up for another turn or two if not prodded. But that is an option. I would recommend trying to clear out the American forces as quickly as possible. Again, pay attention to the odds. Pay attention to what forces you have and what forces they have, and what kind of defenses you're going to need either down south or up north before committing your forces. But like I said, at a bare minimum, there's no reason not to take this. You want to take more. If you can, commit troops for Manchuria to get more here, to then later on your next turn attack over here. You want to do that. But if Russia's bearing down on you, then you might not be able to. I like to build a factory and a transport minimum on the first turn. The factory to help pump out units directly in Asia, and then the transport to help either deal with taking back islands down here, or taking Australia if maybe England has pulled infantry off on that to try and do something annoying, island hopping. And if you can drop off more transports, you could potentially get more coastal bombardments, especially because we're assuming we're going to lose this transport. So you're only going to have one transport at the beginning of your first turn, and so buying a second one is generally a good idea. Now, there are a couple of places you might put it. The obvious choice would be Manchuria, simply because it has 3 production, so you'll produce 3 units there a turn. So that's not a bad choice, especially if it is safe from a Russian attack or a Soviet attack from the north. If you think that might be a little bit on the weak side, maybe you don't want to put it there and risk losing it. If England down there isn't really causing you problems, you could put it here in Sinkiang. And the reason that I say that is because while Manchuria has to go through 2 territories to really get to the Soviet heartland over there, unless it wants to go way around this way, way around up north. If you place it here, 1-2 spaces in one turn, it's already in the heartland. It can already start threatening Caucasus. So if things are looking okay for you down here, then I think that this is a great place to put it. You will only get 2 units out of it per turn as opposed to 3. Those are the 2 main places I would consider. Now, if you don't really feel safe down south, you don't really feel safe up north because of the combined effort of the Soviets and India, you could place it here. Now, this has the disadvantage of both. It's going to take you an extra turn to threaten Soviet proper, and you're also only going to be able to produce 2 production. I think that there's still a benefit to doing that, but if you are feeling that threatened in the first turn, you might consider skipping the factory and going more heavily in favor of transports and ground troops, and using that to try and secure one of these flanks before building a factory there. Just something to keep in mind. Generally, I would not go after the United States. If it looks like the U.S. is gearing up to fight you, yes, you want to build up your surface fleet. You want to counter what they have, maybe make some preemptive strikes to clear out some of their navy if there's an opportune moment. But there's not a whole lot of production to be gained, but there's a whole lot of production to be lost potentially just by building up while the other allies take out Germany. So unless the U.S. is going after you, I wouldn't really recommend going after them. In fact, if they are not going after you and aggressively going after Germany, then you might consider making a feint move, maybe going up, taking Alaska, maybe taking Hawaii, maybe both, just to make the U.S. a little bit nervous, make them build up on the West Coast, maybe make them reconsider diverting their forces east so they start pulling a little bit back, take the pressure off of Germany. Attacking Alaska, especially attacking Hawaii to a degree, are both a good way to do that. You kind of tweak the nose of the U.S. and get them focusing on you if they're focusing too much on Germany. Sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on the experience of the player and how likely they are to get flustered. Again, a lot of this game is about the psychological piece as well. Maybe not quite as much as the strategy, but sometimes if you, as with any strategy game, if you can rattle your opponent, oftentimes they're more likely to make a mistake, which helps you. So those are just the things to keep in mind as Japan. Again, because the other countries go before you, and some of what they could do could have a big influence on what you need to do, what you need to respond to. You just need to keep an eye out for flexibility. Just keep a couple general things in mind. Like I said, try and clear out the British Navy. Try and, at the minimum, move forward. Keep an eye on where you want to build that factory, or if you want to go as transports. And if the Allies are going heavily after Germany, you might want to keep that in mind. Or if it sounds like the U.S. is going to go after you, you'll want to keep that in mind as well. So just a lot of things on the table as Japan. The key is being flexible, having a few key objectives in mind and committing yourself to that, but just observing, taking in what everybody else is doing, and working that into your strategy going forward. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments or strategies you'd like me to take a look at, please leave a comment. I'd be happy to consider those, maybe run some scenarios, and I hope you enjoyed this video.